Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Courageous Leadership with Virginia Prodan. I'm your host. I am an international human rights attorney, a speaker, an author of Saving My Assassin, and a host of this podcast. We have the privilege and the honor to have an amazing fighter for freedom in America and around the world. His name is Steve Lance. He is an executive producer with Sincere Picture and vice president of NTD television. He has been reporting for many years on United States and China relationship and foreign influence operation. Steve, thank you so very much for coming to our podcast. It's an honor and a privilege. And as a person who live under socialists and communists, I don't have enough words to thank you so much for what you are doing, how you expose the socialists and communists, not only in China, but coming to America, and the risk that you are taking when you fight against communists and socialists, because it's always a risk. Thank you so very much.
Virginia, the honor is mine. And, I have to say, you and your story that I've just come to know is truly incredible because you survived it. You survived under the iron fist. It's a heck of a lot easier for me being over here, not under it yet, but you lived under it. You stayed strong, true to your belief. You represented those under tremendous pressure for their freedom. So really, the credit is all yours.
Thank you. Can you tell us what exactly, and to me, is how God put on your heart to do those things, to expose communists and socialists?
Well, I think, the challenge with communism and socialism is you first have to understand what it is. And it's sort of a complicated ideology, a sophisticated ideology, right? Rooted in Marxism. But once you understand it and you know sort of everything that is attached to it and all of the tricks that they use, it becomes a lot more clear. And then, of course, the media outlet that I work for has written really a lot, but two very consequential texts when it comes to communism. One is the 9 commentaries on the Chinese Communist Party, which was published in right around 2005, 2006, and triggered a movement inside of China, which is called the Tuidang movement. Tuidang means withdraw from the party, the Communist Party. And so since that was published, it has prompted over 400 million people who have been affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party to withdraw and renounce their membership. And I'm proud to work at an organization that was founded by Chinese Americans and Chinese dissidents who, like yourself, lived under communism and understand it on such a deep level. And I've met so many people, so many of my colleagues who have lived under that, iron fist. And, for a journalist in this day and age, but really any journalist, our job is to give a voice to the voiceless. That's what we're supposed to do. Talk about stories that matter and things that, that people need to know about. And you can tell, being based here in Washington, D.C., things are just sort of on a routine, if you will. And it's hard to sort of get outside of the box and uncover those stories. And so that's really what our media is focused on, telling stories that matter that otherwise aren't being delivered to the world's people.
I believe that you are so perfectly right, and you nailed it when you said that you have to understand them. When I came to America, I have the honor and privilege to be invited at the White House and to meet President Ronald Reagan, and he knew socialists and communists so much, and for that reason, he knew how to expose them. He knew how to help people like myself or others, and by you focusing on knowing them, you have no idea. Maybe you know many of them, but maybe not all of them that you are helping. And it's very important. And I cannot say enough in words how many Chinese people, are thanking you, even though maybe you never met them. But it's important to know and then to expose them.
Yeah, that's just it. They don't have a voice inside of China, right? And this is a global economy. There's so much interconnection and business that is done. So there is a certain responsibility. If every time we go to a Walmart or a dollar store or a clothing store and pay for something that's made in China that might be made under slave labor. There's so much of that is still pervasive inside of China. These are prisoners of conscience. These are spiritual believers that are completely innocent of any type of crime. Their only crime is trying to be faithful and live a better life, if you can wrap your head around that. That's why like those sort of concepts don't really resonate with those of us that were born and raised in the United States. We take a lot of our freedoms for granted. And you mentioned Ronald Reagan. A lot of people don't realize, he was the governor of California before becoming president for 2 terms. But before he became governor, he was very active in the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood. And one of his greatest missions was sounding the alarm over communism and the influence operations as the communists tried to infiltrate Hollywood back during the Cold War. And so, here we are now, fast forward, Cold War is over, but communism is not dead. It's very much alive. And the new Cold War is with China, the largest communist entity and party on the planet that is surpassing the Soviet Union in terms of their tactics and their ability to infiltrate. There was no social media during the Cold War. There was no mass migration. There weren't 500,000 Russian students in our universities, but there are Chinese now, and they're in Hollywood, they're on Wall Street, they're in Washington, and it's a major issue that needs to be recognized and dealt with.
What do you think is the best way? You are doing as a reporter, you are doing your job, you are learning about them, you are exposing, but what will be the best approach for university, for students that are in the same classroom with these Chinese, socialist and communist leaders?
That's such a great question. I'm from Boston and have spent a lot of time on various college campuses, whether it be Boston University, Harvard, MIT. I have a lot of friends that have studied there as well. And there is a high presence of mainland Chinese students. And I'm not saying all of them, but many of them, just by default, growing up in communist China, are essentially assets and carry out and spread a lot of the propaganda. But there is also a conscious effort by the CCP's United Front Work Department and various spy organizations to subvert those universities. They're not just stealing our technology, which we know they're doing, but there also are counterintelligence and intelligence influence operations where they know who some of the most influential East Asian studies professors are, the American ones, and they speak eloquently, these Chinese students, and they're well read, they're well spoken, and they might say, "Oh, professor, you don't really understand. Taiwan is a renegade province. They really need to come back to the motherland, or that Falun Gong spiritual practice. It's not what it looks like. It's an evil cult." Meantime, the Chinese Communist Party is the one who sponsored it as a cultural phenomenon in the early 90s when it was being practiced freely before they cracked down on it. And there's a lot of these influence campaigns that are taking place throughout all of our universities that have these Chinese student and scholar associations and all of these other benevolent sounding names. And I would just say, we don't want to, this isn't about, fear mongering, but it's about, educating ourselves about the tactics that they use. There's a lot of great resources. I think his name was Yuri Bezmenov or Bezmagov. former Russian KGB agent who defected to the United States. I would search his name. I know I butchered it, but I'm sure if you put a variation of it in YouTube, it will pop up. And it talks about how sophisticated these operations are by communist authorities and influences, and how they go about trying to subvert our culture and our country. And when you understand that, you will be able to be on guard and defend against it.
I believe they are right, and everybody can look and find out. But I can tell from my own experience that after dictator Ceausescu in Romania was killed, the next party discovered far away from the city in the big forest, a huge town built only for Communist Party and leaders, young people. They will learn English very well. They will learn the Western civilization and everything, and will be sent to America and spy. So that was even during communists in Romania, not only in China. So they are doing the same thing again and again. And another thing that I want to mention is this: by the grace of God, I came in 1988, but America today, it's not the same of America that I came in 1988. I was blessed. I didn't know one word in English because the dictator said that if you learn English, you learn the language of our enemies. I knew 5 foreign languages, now English. I learned English. I went back to law school at SMU here in Dallas, and I raised 3 kids and a single mom. And the first one graduated from SMU like me, the second one from Harvard Law School, and my son from United States Air Force Academy. This is the best country in the world. You come empty-handed and you have the opportunity to rebuild your country. American people need to understand that there is no freedom, even though the way it is right now, or opportunity to rebuild your life like in America. And they have to learn it, and we have to keep educating him until they understand that. And you are doing an amazing job on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you mentioned the feel that it was, you felt when you came to America in the 1980s, and you fast forward to right now, so much anti-American sentiment.
Yes.
It's actually not organic. If you take a step back and you look at where this sort of rhetoric is coming from, and this hate breeding in our country against our own country, all roads lead back to communist ideology. And look no further than the Black Lives Matter movement and riots that took place in 2020. The founders of that are, self-admitted Marxist, and they were proudly talking about it. I'm not making this up. You can search it online. They say that they're trained Marxist, and they use these Bolshevik Maoist tactics to rebel rouse the people that are not familiar with these tactics. A lot of it just sounds good in theory. When you're not, when it's difficult with inflation and it's hard to make ends meet, it's easy to target people's emotions, and they're very good at doing that. But it's important to remember that this is not organic. It all comes back to that ideology, and before you can understand it and address it, you have to sort of go on the, down the rabbit hole of trying to understand how it works with Marxism, how they pit the oppressor, so-called oppressor, and the oppressed class, and use various ways to, make people submit to this really awful ideology that has not brought in any prosperity. There's a lot of promises, but never any prosperity. Why did the Soviet Union fall and crack in the Soviet bloc, right? Why hasn't it worked? In China, they'll argue that it has worked, but they've been cooking the books in China for decades. We don't know what the real situation is. And by a lot of internal reports right now, the Chinese economy is on the verge of a catastrophic collapse that could bring down the world economy, right? Look at Cuba, Venezuela. It just doesn't work.
Yes, you are so right about that. I can tell you that socialists and communists promotes heaven and delivers hell. Nothing but hell. And they also work on theories, like you said, oppression against oppressor, rich versus poor. But in the same time, they are focused on the fact that if they say lie after lie after lie, after a long time, people will believe the lie.
There's an expression in Chinese. It's I'll try to butcher it, but I believe it's something along the lines of "huang yan shuo san bian, cheng zhen li," which means when a lie is told 3 times, it becomes the truth. And the communists, they're masters in psychology. These aren't stupid people. Look at where this ideology has been incubating for decades. It's been in our universities, and so they know the psychology behind it. They know the right things to say, but at the same time, there's there's still a lot of people that are buying into it. And to your point, it's something that we need to educate more people about. You see the diaspora communities that have fled communism, like yourself, the Cuban population down in Miami, the Venezuelans in Miami. They're some of the most fierce critics, some of the most staunchest critics of communism and what it does to people. And so I would say, talk to a friend from one of those countries and see what it does. I have a colleague of mine right now. He's actually from Venezuela. He's on leave right now. He joined the Marine Corps Reserves. He loves America, and his family in Venezuela was a very very well off family. I believe his dad was an attorney, and after Chavez and Maduro took over, they had to flee the country. They weren't able to sustain, and so there's so many examples of people, not just in China but Venezuela, Cuba, Romania, Hungary, that have experienced the red terror of communism, and it would be great if more people could learn about it and before it becomes too late, because it's knocking on our doorstep right here in the United States right now.
I believe that many people are listening. Many people are changing their minds. The ones that are still not taking a reaction, I believe, are the people that are aware that if I am aware of something, that I have to take a position. So they said, I better ignore, act like I don't know, because I hope someone else will take a position. But one day, many times I tell people, read my chapter 3 in my memoir 3 times. It's a story of my uncle who was a businessman, didn't want to take a position, went to England for 6 months or a year. When he returned, socialism was in Romania, and they came to his office and said something, and he started to speak, and he was put in psychiatric hospital to be re-educated. And he decided after that to stay in his own room, not eat and die, because he was not able to look in the mirror, because he didn't speak when it was time to speak.
The slow creep of communism is no longer a slow creep. This is something that we have been warning about, fighting against for decades, whether it be the Cold War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, all communism at play. We have laws on the books that in order to become a United States citizen, you cannot have been affiliated with the Communist Party, right? Those were laws made for good reason, right? And so when you think about it from that perspective, it's been churning for a long time, and now we see it taking on a different form. They might not use the word communism, but a lot of the principles and the means to get there are identical. Don't let the term socialism fool you. It's ultimately a microwave communism, not even just a precursor to communism. It could be called socialism. And then, if you look at sort of what the Democrat Socialists of America stand for and a lot of the verbiage they use, and then you cross-reference that with the so-called Constitution of the USSR, I highly recommend doing it. It's a great exercise. A lot of the same flowery language being told, but we saw how it ended up in Russia, and what a tragedy it would be if it were to gain any more traction inside of our country. And sadly, it has. You know, it started off with a few members of Congress. Now, this election cycle, it's looking like there's a lot more.
Yeah. Now, you are so right about that. Tell us a little bit about your documentary, Unbroken.
Thank you for asking. So, Unbroken, the untold story of Shen Yun. For your audience members and viewers that may not be familiar with Shen Yun is a classical Chinese dance company it's based in New York, and it was established by a spiritual community of Falun Gong or Falun Dafa practitioners. Falun Gong is a peaceful Buddhist-based meditation practice based on three core principles: truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And it was spread widely in the early 90s throughout China, and it became so popular, even the government was embracing it and sponsoring it. But when they took a census, they found out roughly 1 out of 12 Chinese people were practicing it, which in China at that time, estimates were around 100 million. It outnumbered Communist Party members. And so the CCP, the leader, the dictator at the time, his name was Jiang Zemin, he condemned it and outlawed it. They deemed it as an evil cult. They said the practitioners were crazy and that they killed himself. There was a huge propaganda effort inside and outside of China to defame the practice, along with rounding them up and putting them in forced labor camps and prisons, eventually escalating it to murdering them, and one of the worst crimes that humanity's come to know, which is live organ harvesting, all on this group of people. And so some of these folks were able to escape China and immigrate to the United States, and they set up in the early 2000s the Shenyun Performing Arts with a mission to restore traditional Chinese culture, and at the same time, part of that, talk about modern day issues like this persecution. And their tagline is China before communism. And why is that so important? It's because what was China before communism? It was actually, the Chinese people call their 5,000 years, think about that, 5,000 years of culture. They call it divinely inspired. They were deeply rooted in faith, whether it be Buddhism, Taoism, or Confucianism. And the Chinese Communist Party, when they took over, they went through great lengths to rout out all of those traditions. They toppled Buddhist temples. They started to make fun and make light of religion, and really tried to subvert the Chinese people's minds so that the only supreme being inside of China would be the Chinese Communist Party. And so because of all that I've just laid out, I know it was a long answer, with Shenyun being established in 2006, I think it was, 20 years later, they have flourished with this beautiful show that goes all around the world, Europe, Asia, the United States, obviously, just not China. The CCP has taken issue with it because it shows the Chinese people and the world what China could be like without communism. And, there have been, sadly, some Western media outlets, particularly the New York Times, and we talk about this in the film, in the investigative arc, that have been parroting a lot of Beijing's propaganda to sort of demonize and defame Shenyun, to sort of water down and minimize their message. And so in the film, there's really two tracks. One is sort of a human interest track where we follow these dancers and get to know them and their craft. I mean, they're Olympian-style athletes, but they're also artists. And so there's a really fun and intimate and nice human interest track. But then there's also the investigative track where we sort of explore the New York Times editorial process. They've taken issue with Shenyun and written now up to 12 hit pieces. And it's very interesting to find out sort of who their sources were, if you will. I'll spoil it a little bit. There were three key sources that they used to defame Shen Yun. Those three all have ties back to Beijing. There are some other folks that we were able to find and figure out that have ties to the United Front Work Department. And it's just really been very well received so far. And it's, I would say, also very timely.
So where can we see the documentary?
Well, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but we do have a screening right here in Washington, D.C. tomorrow on Capitol Hill, where some Shen Yun performers will be there. There might be some availability left to join that viewing. But also, you can get it on any major streaming platform, whatever your preference is, whether it's on Apple, Amazon, YouTube. You can also watch it for free at ntdfilms.com.
Where can the audience find you and find more about your work and learn more about what you're doing, exposing the communist and socialist ideology?
Thank you for that. So my day job, I actually host a daily political news show on NTD television. That's NTD. It's called The Capitol Report. I'm the host there weeknights, Eastern Time, 7 p.m. live. So I'd love for your audience, if they're interested, to tune in.
What do you want to tell the audience who is not very convinced about the fact that they should stand up before it's too late in America? What would be your advice to them?
I would just say, look at Tank Man, 1989, Tiananmen Square, that iconic image, of a Chinese student that was standing up for democracy. Do we want to get to that point? Do we want to try communism and live under that type of rule, only to then be potentially run over by tanks and shot by military? I know it sounds crazy, but that's where communism leads to. If you read some of the texts that I mentioned, the 9 commentaries on the Chinese Communist Party, over 80 million Chinese people have died unnatural deaths under communism. As you know, growing up in communist Romania, it only leads to death, strife, struggle, poverty. And so now's the time to educate ourselves and stand up to it. And we all have a responsibility too, I believe. Once you understand it, you don't want to push away folks. I don't like to preach to the choir, if you will, right? Because this really is a battle right now to educate people. And so if you have, some young nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters that have just gone through the education system, they're pretty captured right now by a lot of those socialist professors. And so it's a good opportunity to kind of find key resources that you've come across that have helped you come to certain conclusions and share those with friends and family, because it's really an educational process.
Yes, you're right. It's an education process. Many times I said to my audience on my podcast when I trained them, I said, take them to lunch, pay their lunch, and ask them question. Don't say anything. Ask them question. Why do you think socialists and communists will work and everything? And then after they tell you everything, poke their ideology. Ask them a specific question. They will put a question mark in their mind and go on and continue that relationship until they will come to you and will say, you know what? I think you're right. It works. Whatever it's good for you, works, and do it. And Steve, I cannot thank you enough what you are doing. You are an amazing reporter that wants to do what I believe God entrusted you to do, to protect freedom, to protect family, and to protect freedom of speech and freedom of religion, not only in China, Romania, America, but all over the world. And your work is very, very precious. We cannot thank you enough for what you are doing and what NTD stands for. We are grateful, and we are grateful for your time, and I hope to have you some other times with different other news or things that you are doing, because you always come up with the best things on NTD.
Thank you so much for your kind words. A lot to live up to in your really beautiful statement there, but we really appreciate you and everything you do as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our Courageous Leadership with Virginia Prodan. If you have any questions at all, don't forget to go to virginiaprodanbooks.com/contact. Put there your question, everything that you need. We are here to help you. We thank you so much. Our podcast is Wednesday and Saturday at 10 o'clock. And until next time, I hope that you take everything that Steve expressed to us. Go to his website and learn as much as possible and stand up for what is right, because you are here for a purpose. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. The purpose is to defend freedom here in America and around the world. God bless you. Bye-bye.